Geun-soo yells for his Hyung and calls the police, but he quickly realizes that he's being cornered by the mob. In a last effort to seek help, he calls Sung-won and yells for help before his phone is trampled on. The mob knocks Geun-soo unconscious and dumps him into the car with unconscious Yi-seo. Geun-won looks at Saeroyi at the bottom of the hill and notes the familiar scene. Mob boss Hee-hoon apologizes to Saeroyi and justifies his betrayal as business. Sirens approach, prompting the mob to clear out. Saeroyi arrives at the hospital in critical condition and enters surgery. After seeing the news of Saeroyi's accident, Min-young and Officer Oh join the IC team and Soo-ah in the waiting area. Sung-won asks to talk to Officer Oh in private and shows him photos of Yi-seo's kidnapping from the surveillance cameras. Then, he shows the hostage photos that he received. He decides to go to the meeting spot on his own as instructed without informing the police. Sung-won remembers seeing a suspicious van at the hospital and says that he needs to confirm a hunch. President Jang hears about Saeroyi's accident and then asks Secretary Kim to summon Geun-soo. Geun-soo has not reported to work that day. Geun-won reads the headlines on Saeroyi's accident to Geun-soo and Yi-seo, initially lying about Saeroyi's death. He regrets that Saeroyi is only in critical condition. Geun-soo demands that his brother let Yi-seo go. Geun-soo drops the truth that Geun-won was imprisoned because President Jang chose Jang Ji-ae over his son, but Geun-won seems to deny that reality. He shows no interest in redeeming himself for Jang Ji-ae and fixates on ruining Saeroyi. He applauds himself for identifying Yi-seo as the key to luring both Saeroyi and Geun-soo. Pulling Yi-seo's hair, Geun-won recalls her confession that she loves Saeroyi like crazy and asks how she feels now that Saeroyi got injured trying to save her. Yi-seo cries uncontrollably, causing Geun-won to laugh and Geun-soo to angrily writhe, tied to a chair. Geun-soo asks how Geun-won plans to deal with the consequences of his crimes, but he blithely says he's keeping the two of them alive because he doesn't care about the consequences. He leaves in a satisfied mood and locks the door behind him. Yi-seo breaks out of her act and stands to find an edge to undo the ties around her wrists. Geun-soo looks surprised at Yi-seo's sudden emotional stability, and she explains that Geun-won is merely looking to torture her. That's why he left her half tied up while completely strapping Geun-soo to the chair. Outside the shack, mob boss Hee-hoon asks when he can expect to be paid, but Geun-won isn't paying him until the Hee-hoon fully delivers his side of the deal. Hee-hoon tells Geun-won to take it easy, explaining that he goes back 10 years with Saeroyi, and Geun-won bursts into laughter. He figured that Hee-hoon accepted this mercenary task because 1 billion, and Hee-hoon fumes as he leaves. In his office, Hee-hoon's underling shows him the newspaper headlines and tries to convince him to back out, since Geun-won's requests are getting out of hand. Then, he hears a familiar visitor's voice calling out to him. It's Sung-won, and the mobster at the door refuses entry. Sung-won obliges to seeing Hee-hoon next time but finds issue with the mobster's tone. In the hospital, unconscious Saeroyi dreams about seeing father in his high school uniform. He runs into his father's arms and tears up in his warm embrace, telling his father that he missed him. Dad asked if something happened at school, and Saeroyi says that he's just tired. Sung-won continues to knock obnoxiously against his former boss's door, demanding to meet with Hee-hoon. Tired of Sung-won's antics, the guard mobsters knock him to the ground. Sung-won reports the assault to the police, and that earns him a punch to the face. Instead of retaliating with violence, Sung-won continues to knock on the door and announces his suspicions about Hee-hoon's involvement in Saeroyi's accident. The guard mobster doubts that the police will believe the testimony of an ex-convict, and that reminds Sung-won of Saeroyi's conviction that you shouldn't diminish your worth just because of the ex-convict label. Sung-won shows off his business card and retorts that the police will take him seriously because he's the director of IC. Don't you dare determine my worth. At the hospital, Soo-ah desperately asks Saeroyi to wake up. Hyunhee receives a call from Sung-won that he's at the police station, and he asks if Soo-ah is there. Meanwhile, Saeroyi continues to meet his father in his dream, this time dressed as an adult at the pub where he first had alcohol with his father. Dad pours Saeroyi a drink and asks if he's made friends. Saeroyi shares that he has Soo-ah, Ho-jin, and many close dongsangs, and Dad marvels at Saeroyi's changed social life. Dad asks about the dongsangs, and Saeroyi names Sung-won, Hyunhee, and Tony. Then, he tries to recall one more person and seems to only carry a blurry memory of Yi-seo. He doesn't remember Yi-seo in this dream and has a drink with his father. Hyunhee and Soo-ah arrive at the police station and find that Sung-won was assaulted. Hyunhee worries about Sung-won's injury, and he had intentionally asked Soo-ah to come because he knew Hyunhee would overreact. Then, he sees Hee-hoon in the parking lot waiting for him. Sung-won confronts his former boss and asks for Yi-seo's whereabouts. He has surveillance footage of the mobsters taking Yi-seo, but Hee-hoon denies that the abduction is his doing. Sung-won warns Hee-hoon that if Yi-seo and Geun-soo don't return, he'll give up on living properly, implying that he'll retaliate with violence. The threat doesn't shake Hee-hoon and drives off, telling his underling that they have a job to finish. Sung-won doesn't share any details with Hyunhee or Soo-ah, but he hands Soo-ah an envelope from the police station. Soo-ah tells President Jang that Geun-won is behind Saeroyi's accident and the abduction of Yi-seo and Geun-soo. She hands him the envelope from Soo-ah, which shows Geun-won captured on the surveillance cameras at the mob's office. Soo-ah reminds him that the hit and run from 15 years ago and his abandonment of Geun-won 4 years ago made Geun-won capable of such crimes today. President Jang plans to deal with the impact of Geun-won's crimes on Jang-ga's image and seems to prepare for another cover-up. Soo-ah looks disillusioned by President Jang's response and asks if he dealt with the hit and run 15 years ago in the same manner. After sawing at the ropes all night, Yi-seo finally frees herself from the ties. As she unties Geun-soo, he doubts that they can escape the locked room. Yi-seo rebukes Geun-soo's unmotivated approach and says that this is why he can never win against Saeroyi. Geun-soo accuses her of knowing nothing about his struggle in Jang-ga, but Yi-seo knows that essentially he lost himself by entering Jang-ga. Geun-soo argues that not everyone can be like Saeroyi, but Yi-seo disagrees, and we see the truth in that argument as Soo-ah submits her resignation letter to President Jang. She reminds him of his hatred of spineless people, and she asserts that she's making a decision for herself for the first time. President Jang accepts her resignation, and then Soo-ah puts a pouch on the table. It's her collection of files documenting 10 years' worth of Jang-ga's corruption, from stock scams to slush funds to bribes. She says there's a limit to influencing people with power and fear. Soo-ah warns President Jang that he should worry about the greater damage on Jang-ga instead of just covering up this incident. As Soo-ah leaves, she remembers her promise with Manager Park, who lent her money for college and told her to pay him back when she's successful. She promised to pay him back 3 times the amount, and Soo-ah looks at the resignation letter and corruption files tearfully. Yi-seo finishes untying Geun-soo and tells him that living by your values is possible, and people like him just make excuses to live more conveniently. Geun-soo admits that Saeroyi got injured while trying to save him and fears for the worst, but Yi-seo rejects the possibility of the worst. She claims that Saeroyi has never let her down. In Saeroyi's dream, he follows Dad to a bridge, and Dad explains that Saeroyi's bitter nights will be over when he crosses over. And this reminds him of a conversation with Yi-seo. She told Saeroyi that she used to not want to be reborn because life is hard. Dad knows that Saeroyi's life has been difficult, and Saeroyi admits that no matter how much he convinced himself that he could persevere, he never lived a day comfortably. Tearing up, Saeroyi's voice trembles as he shares that missing his father and hating someone was burdensome. Dad looks at his son with sympathy, and Saeroyi hugs his father. Embracing his father, Saeroyi says that if he's reborn, he wants to live as Dad's son. He says, "I love you very much." Dad says ditto, and Saeroyi remembers the rest of his conversation with Yi-seo. She said that after meeting Saeroyi, she found herself relating more to a poem. Saeroyi takes a step back from the bridge and tells Dad that he's not coming. Saeroyi says that he has a date and apologizes to Dad. He tells Dad that his nights are no longer just bitter because he has a family who needs him, and he looks forward to the future days he'll spend with them. Mustering up the courage to say goodbye, "Though I don't have you, Dad, I'll live on carrying my longing for you." Dad smiles and says that this is life, that as long as you're alive. Dad approaches Saeroyi and holds his son's shoulders and says, "I'm proud of you, son. Continue to live on." Dad heads across the bridge, and Saeroyi watches his father longingly before he wakes up in the hospital. When Saeroyi sits up, Soo-ah runs to his side, but he can barely register anything. He breaks into sobs, and Soo-ah enters the room to find Saeroyi crying hard. Soo-ah says that this was the first time he saw Saeroyi crying, and though he didn't understand why Saeroyi was crying, he was relieved. President Jang receives a late-night call from Geun-won, who confirms that he's holding Geun-soo and Yi-seo hostage. He assures his father that he won't touch Geun-soo, since he knows how much President Jang values his selected heir. Geun-won sadly admits that he wanted to be a proud son for his father and wonders when it all went wrong. If it was when he first met Saeroyi or when he committed the hit and run. Geun-won reminds President Jang of the night that he broke the chicken's neck and says that he held on to the analogy that Saeroyi was the chicken. He convinced himself that it was unnecessary to feel bad about killing pigs or chickens. Geun-won admits that he was always scared, but he's not scared now, thanks to his father's teachings. He's sick of being abandoned by his father because of a worthless chicken like Saeroyi. He vows to end himself and Saeroyi for good. Geun-won shares that he's in pageant and says that only President Jang can stop him, since this is all thanks to him. He instructs his father to just abandon him again, if he wants to stop him. President Jang is shocked by his son's impetuous decisions. Geun-won hangs up and makes another call as a gift to his father. When Geun-won looks inside the locked shed, he sees that Geun-soo has disappeared. He busts into the room, and Geun-soo hits him with a piece of wood. Geun-won falls to the ground in pain, and Yi-seo takes the wood and seems determined to kill Geun-won, saying that she can claim self-defense. Geun-soo convinces her that Saeroyi wouldn't want her to kill someone for him, and she reluctantly leaves Geun-won alive and writhing in pain. Resurrected Saeroyi heads out of his hospital room as Soo-ah tries to talk some sense into him. But Saeroyi insists that he needs to save Yi-seo. He knows that Geun-won is after him, and Soo-ah tries to stop him, knowing that Geun-won will kill him. She holds his hand desperately, but Saeroyi finally admits the truth. He likes Yi-seo. Soo-ah drops her hold and says that everyone knew except for him. He tries to leave, but Soo-ah grabs him again in distress. Saeroyi says that he's not going to Geun-won to die. He's going there to live. He says that he'll fall apart if something bad happens to Yi-seo, and he leaves despite Soo-ah's tearful pleas. Yi-seo and Geun-won try to run away from Geun-won, but they're met with the mobsters just as they arrive on the site. Geun-won finally catches up, and mob boss Hee-hoon says that he's there to finish up the job. Provoked by the beating, Geun-won decides that he'll forget Saeroyi and just kill Yi-seo. Saeroyi receives a message from Geun-won informing him that President Jang knows his location. He enlists Sung-won's help, and they meet with President Jang to ask for Geun-won's location. President Jang tries to deny any knowledge, but Saeroyi cites the messages from Geun-won and threatens to report this to the police. He advises President Jang to cooperate in the interest of protecting Jang Ji-ae. President Jang remembers why he made Jang Ji-ae, to ensure that his family would not starve like him. He reflects on what it has become and blames Saeroyi. While mountains and rivers change in over 10 years, Saeroyi hasn't budged at all. As Saeroyi grows impatient, President Jang recalls what he's wanted all these years. He tells Saeroyi to kneel in front of him. Sung-won can't believe President Jang, but Saeroyi knows exactly where this is going. Saeroyi remembers his confrontations with President Jang, and he narrates, "There are impossible things, things beyond death. For President Jang, kneeling is one of them. But for me, in this moment, I could easily kneel 1,000,000 times." Then, Saeroyi proceeds to kneel in front of a smug President Jang.